As civilization advances, we are developing technologies that once existed only in the realm of science fiction. Artificial intelligence surprises us every day. Spacecraft journey to the moon, and telescopes bring us glimpses of distant worlds. Yet despite all these breakthroughs, the nature of the mind remains an enigma. In fact, few topics in philosophy are as puzzling as the question of what the mind truly is. And one of the reasons for this confusion is René Descartes' enduring legacy, the theory of dualism. We all know René Descartes for his famous statement, Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. This phrase is so significant that it marks Descartes as the first modern philosopher, ushering in a new era of thought. His theory of dualism, which emerged from this foundational idea, changed the course of philosophy forever. But was this shift beneficial for philosophy and science? That is still a matter of debate. Many philosophers argue that Descartes' dualism created more problems than it solved. You might be wondering, but aren't the mind and body already separate? Wasn't this idea around long before Descartes? And in a way, you would be right. The idea that the mind and body are distinct entities existed long before Descartes. Philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle all contemplated this duality. Descartes, in many ways, built upon their ideas to formulate his own version of dualism. To truly grasp Descartes' theory, we must first explore how earlier philosophers approached the mind-body relationship. The relationship between the mind and body has been a subject of deep contemplation for centuries. Even in ancient Greece, philosophers wrestled with this profound question. Among them, one of the most influential thinkers was undoubtedly Plato. Many of us recognize Plato for his famous allegory of the cave and his theory of forms, which lies at the heart of his philosophy. According to Plato, the things we interact with in our daily lives are mere imperfect copies of a higher, perfect reality, the world of forms. He proposed a dualistic view of the universe, distinguishing between the flawed material world and the perfect immaterial realm of forms. In his allegory, prisoners chained inside a cave mistake shadows on the wall for reality, unaware that true existence lies beyond their limited perception. Just as a horse in the physical world is only a reflection of the ideal form of a horse, what we perceive as reality is, in fact, just an echo of a more profound truth. But what does this have to do with the mind-body problem? Plato argued that because forms are immaterial, the mind, capable of grasping these abstract concepts, must also be immaterial. This led him to conclude that the mind and the body are two distinct entities. The body belongs to the physical world, but the mind belongs to the realm of forms. Another philosopher who explored the mind-body distinction was Aristotle. Unlike Plato, Aristotle approached the problem through his concept of form. To Aristotle, a form is the essence of a thing, the defining characteristics that make it what it is. However, unlike Plato, Aristotle was skeptical of the mind's independence. He argued that, unlike other faculties, the mind lacks a specific organ responsible for its functions. Why did Aristotle believe this? He reasoned that every organ is defined not just by what it does, but also by what it cannot do. For example, the eyes are responsible for vision, but cannot smell or feel heat. The mind, however, is capable of comprehending all things and has no inherent limitations. Since it cannot be confined to a specific organ, Aristotle concluded that the mind must not be material. This, in turn, reinforced the idea that the mind and body are fundamentally separate. I think, therefore, mind and body are separate. René Descartes sought to attain an undeniable, absolute truth, knowledge so certain that no skepticism could shake it. To achieve this, he employed his famous methodic doubt, a rigorous approach he detailed in his 1642 work, Meditations on First Philosophy. According to this method, Descartes resolved to reject anything that carried even the slightest possibility of doubt, no matter how absurd the skepticism might seem. His goal was to strip away every uncertain belief until he arrived at a truth that could not be doubted under any circumstances. This relentless skepticism ultimately led him to his most iconic realization. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Even if everything else was uncertain, Even if he were merely a brain in a vat, deceived by some external force, he could not doubt that he was thinking. And if he was thinking, then he must exist. This was the rock upon which he built his philosophy, and from it emerged his theory of dualism. But how did Descartes leap from "I think" to "mind and body are separate"? The answer lies in his radical skepticism. If he could doubt the existence of his body, but not the existence of his thoughts, then the mind must be fundamentally different from the body. The body belongs to the physical world, subject to deception, but the mind, aware of its own existence, is something entirely distinct. For Descartes, this undeniable distinction proved that the mind and body were two separate entities. How does neuroscience approach the idea of dualism? With Descartes' introduction of dualism, philosophy entered a new era, one that, according to some thinkers, brought as much trouble as it did insight. Since his time, the debate over dualism has raged on, dividing philosophers and scientists alike. Opponents of dualism often pose a critical question. If mind and body are separate, how do we perceive the world? A fair challenge, wouldn't you say? Consider a fascinating wager made 25 years ago between a philosopher and a neurophysiologist. The neurophysiologist was convinced that by 2023, science would uncover the precise mechanisms in the brain that give rise to consciousness. The philosopher, however, argued that such a discovery was impossible. The deadline has passed, and the philosopher has won. The fundamental nature of consciousness remains an enigma. So, what does this bet have to do with Descartes' dualism? This is where David Chalmers' distinction between the easy and hard problems of consciousness becomes relevant. Chalmers suggests that questions like, how does the brain integrate information? Or, how does it control behavior and focus attention? Are easy problems, meaning that, with advances in cognitive science, we can reasonably expect to find answers. But the hard problems of consciousness are another matter entirely. These are the deep, philosophical questions that seem beyond the reach of neuroscience. For instance, why does subjective experience accompany neural processes? Or, how does the brain generate self-awareness? These remain largely unanswered. While science has mapped brain activity, it has yet to explain how or why that activity results in something as mysterious as conscious experience itself. What does all of this mean for the future of cognitive science? Even though Chalmers won the bet, scientists like Christoph Koch remain optimistic. They believe that one day we will unravel the mysteries of consciousness and the mind. After all, the so-called easy problems of consciousness, as defined by Chalmers, can already be explained in terms of neural mechanics. The real challenge lies in the hard problems. Think about it. How does a 1.4 kilogram mass of biological tissue, which we call the brain, produce something as rich and immersive as conscious experience? Research into these hard questions is still ongoing. If Chalmers is correct, then explanations offered by cognitive science may never fully capture what consciousness is. This would mean that mind-body duality, and dualism in general, may not even be a problem for cognitive science to solve. Instead, it could be a deeper, more metaphysical issue, one that philosophy, rather than neuroscience, is better suited to address. For now, we will likely continue asking the same age-old questions. Are the mind and body truly separate? If so, how do they interact? And perhaps, just as Descartes once did, we will keep searching for answers. The debate over the nature of the mind and body is not just a philosophical curiosity, but also a crucial issue for modern fields such as artificial intelligence, neuroscience, and consciousness studies. Perhaps one day, we will find satisfying answers to Chalmers' hard questions. Until then, Descartes' legacy of dualism will remain one of the greatest mysteries for both scientists and philosophers alike. Thank you so much for watching and listening. See you in the next video. Bye.